Hello, everybody. What's going on? It's your girl Tiffany coming through right here live in effect. Today, I am going to do a topic on Jacob's H. Carruthers. So, who was Mr. Carruthers? Well, he was not only an educator, but he also studied into history, and he mainly dealt with Kemetic history, Egyptian history, ancient Egypt, and all that great stuff. It's very surprising to me that his name is rarely brought up in the conscious community. It's very surprising because he was one of the committed teachers. He talked a lot about ancient Egypt history and whatnot. So, anyways, he passed away on January the 4th of 2004 at the age of 73. So I just wanted to take the time out to commemorate him and give him his flowers. Also, go into his biography, look at some of the works that he has done so far. So, with that being said, I'm going ahead and record this video. And hopefully, you guys that watch it, you can go ahead and share this video, like the channel, hit the notification bell whenever I come on. And also, if you would like to donate, you can see the Cash App at the bottom of the screen. So, all that great stuff. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get started with this video. And I'm going to post up his image. All right. All right, so this is his bio right here. I'm on Wiki1 website. So, all right then. He went by the name Mazi Jede Shamsu Jehuti, also known as Jacob Hudson Carruthers Jr. He was born on February 15th of 1930 in Dallas, Texas, and he died on January the 4th of 2004 in Chicago. Of course, he was African center, historian, and educator. All right, so it goes into his early days. He was born and raised in Texas, and he attended at Phyllis Whitley High School in Houston, Texas, before going to Samuel Huston College, where he earned a BA in 1950. In 1951, he joined the United States Air Force, and after serving in the United States Air Force, he enrolled for and earned a master's degree in government from Texas Southern University in 1958. Carruthers then went on to become the first African-American student to complete a doctorate in political studies from the University of Colorado in 1966. From 1961 to 1964, Carruthers taught political science at Prairie View College in Texas, and he later taught at Kansas State College in Pittsburgh, Kansas. Then it goes on to say the topic moving to Chicago and the city and the Center for Inner City Studies. All right, after 2 years of teaching political science at Kansas State College from 1966 to 1968, Carruthers moved to Chicago, where he would live and work for the rest of his life. In 1968, Carruthers joined the Center for the Inner City Studies of Northeastern Illinois University. For the next 32 years, Carruthers taught history and education at the Center for Inner City Studies, playing a critical role in the development of the graduate and undergraduate degrees in the Department of Inner City Studies education. The context created by the work of inner city studies with such formidable minds as Anderson Thompson, Robert Starks, and Conrad Worrell would lead to the development of the African Center intellectual movement that would eventually be known as the Chicago School of African Center Thought. Several African Center institutions would come out of this movement, the major ones of which Carruthers would be a driving force. Now it goes on to talk about how he visit Sheikh Anta Diop. In 1975, 1 year after Sheikh Anta Diop, or Sheikh Anta Diop, the famous African scholar, scientist, and his protege and colleague Theophile Obenga successfully defended the African origin of ancient Kemet at the UNESCO symposium in Cairo. Jacob Carruthers visited Diop in Senegal. At this visit, Ife Carruthers right. Diop impressed upon Dr. Carruthers the importance of the study of ancient Egypt, and more importantly, the need to center that study around the command of the Egyptian language, commonly called hieroglyphics. All right. Returning from this meeting, Carruthers said about helping to establish the organizational base to centralize Kush and Kemet as the classical African civilization upon which liberated African institution will be built. Carruthers heeded the advice of Diop and immediately threw himself towards the task of learning the ancient language of Kemetic Meta so as to have a direct access to the ancient sources, while urging others to do likewise as a matter of urgency. This led to the establishment of several key African Center study group movements. Hey, peace to everybody in the chat. Peace to the chat. All right, so here it talks about the Kemetic Institute and ASCAC. With a solid grounding in the understanding of the cultural unity of Africa and a command in the classical African language, Carruthers became instrumental among a team of other African Center scholars in creating an African Center context for the systematic studying of African history with the objective of raising African institutions from the rescued knowledge. In 1978, Carruthers and the African Center research team, composed of A. Yosef Ben Levi, Anderson Thompson, and Correa Royal, founded the Kemetic Institute. This organization was born to address the need for serious restoration driven by Africans on the classical African civilization of Kush and Kemet. Carruthers, as the founding director of the Institute, consistently clarified that the institution was to serve as the springboard for African Center institution building by proving the knowledge base from which other institutions could be nourished. And in February 1984, Carruthers, along with Dr. John Henrik Clark, Asa Grant Hillard, Leonard Jeffries, Yosebin Yakinen, and Malana Karenga, founded the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization at the first annual Ancient Egyptian Study Conference in Los Angeles, California, of which Carruthers was elected the first president. All right. So his personal life, Carruthers was married to Mama Ife Carruthers, with whom he had 3 sons, Jacob III, Darnell, and Christopher, and a daughter named Tawakalitu Jangano Sime. And he died on the 4th of January from pancreatic cancer in his Chicago home at the age of 73. All right. So here's more information about him at the bottom of the page on the bibliography. All right. Here's the references at the bottom. Okay. And here's the external link. All right. So I have some sources that I would like to show you. One of the sources that I'm going to show real fast is a video that he did with historymaker.org. Hold on. Okay, so I'm going to play this video real fast.
So it seems to me that the idea of going to Kemet or Egypt for to hold a conference is a tremendous undertaking. I mean, I don't, I can't think of many organizations um, that could pull something like that off in their third year of existence. I mean, what was it like for you all?
It was a it was very. I was sort of reluctant about it as the president of the organization because I realized how much work was involved in it because I'd been doing study tours for several years by then, and and I really was reluctant about it. But there was such a popular demand for it. I mean, we had a 500 or 600 people in the association at that time. We were just demanding that they wanted to go and hold that conference there, and take over and announce to the world that we were there to take over African African antiquity. So we had to run to catch up with the masses, so to speak. It was a lot of work, tremendous work. But as it turned out, we had 1,000 people who went. And that was really something because the airlines just went crazy trying to get us all there, and it interfered with the with the with the Hajj. Um, in North Africa, the Africans and North Africans were trying to get to Mecca, and we were trying to get to Egypt, and uh, we had all kinds of horrors. They had to one of our groups was 2 days late getting there because the Hajj prevailed in northern Nigeria. I believe the Hajj blew us away and wouldn't and took over the plane and went on to the Hajj. So but it was exciting. And when we all got there, the interesting thing, Aswan is in what they call Egyptian Nubia, and therefore the people look just like us. When we got off the plane, the people who were, in the town looked like us, and they started calling us American Nubians, and they started taking various members into their homes and making them put on galabeers and the galas and so forth and so on. And so, if we kept our mouths shut, they wouldn't have known the difference. But it was a wonderful, wonderful conference. It excited the non-African world, though. The Egyptians, who many of whom do not consider themselves Africans, were very curious, and eventually the equivalent to the FBI in Egypt decided that they were going to record everything we did and watch everything we did and inspect all of our boxes and materials and so forth and so on. So we had the uh, the Egyptian FBI all over the place.
That was him speaking on the ASCAC conference and how they all traveled to Egypt and what the experience was when they first gathered people to going to North Africa and going to see the monuments in ancient Egypt. Well, in today, what is called Egypt. Um, he was just basically giving his experience and whatnot. So I want to go ahead and share some other information, right? These are the articles that was written by him. Okay, I'm back. So I want to share some articles that he has written in the past. Um, so the first article I am going to share, well, he didn't write this article, but someone else wrote the article. It was an author that wrote a biography about him. And let's look at this article, this essay. It's called H. Carruthers and the African Center Discourse on Knowledge, Worldview, and Power by Kamamu Rashad, PhD, Department of Educational Foundations and Inquiry, National Louis University. Okay. So it was written on June 2012 at the Journal of Pan African Studies, Volume 5 and number 4. All right. So it starts off with the introduction. What is sociology of knowledge? The sociology of knowledge is the study of the social construction of knowledge. It seeks to explicate the social, contextual, political, economic, and cultural moorings inherent in all facets of human knowledge. Thus, whether we are integrating the conceptual imperatives of the state or capital, the mandates of school curriculums, or even the policy directives of white supremacy and the worldview orientations that it seeks to impose, we are still speaking of knowledge, its social construction, and the broader social milieu in which it occurs. Thus, before delving into the main ideas of this particular study, it is necessary to explore two dichotomous trends within the construction of knowledge. That is, knowledge as an instrument of hegemony and knowledge as an instrument of liberation. All right, so I'm gonna skip down. I am going to skip down to Africana Studies and Intellectual Warfare. All right, so let's read what this author had to write. For Carruthers, Africana Studies was not simply an area of theoretical inquiry, but it was a critical ground upon which intellectual warfare was waged. This intellectual war was not simply over the development of a body of knowledge focused upon African people, but it was over, if I may borrow a phrase from Karl Marx, that means of intellectual production, that is the ideal matrix that interprets the world through a particular cultural lens and seek to reorder the world's political economy along lines most consistent with this interest. Therefore, Carruthers' focus on history, and often now Valley history, was generally subsumed by his study of histography, and with it the study of the craft of historical knowledge production from antiquity to the present, and inextricable links to the political economy of nations. Furthermore, his concern regarding historiography were wedded to his concern about worldview and the role of African scholars, each of which captures key aspects of Carruthers' reflection upon and contribution to Africana study. And it goes on and says, as a founding member of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization and the Comedy Institute of Chicago, Carruthers was keenly focused on the political nature of historical knowledge production and sought to create organizational structures that could enable Africana scholars, and by extension the African masses, to escape the strictures of European histography in an empire that he argued was devised to construct an intellectual and moral justification for the political and economic domination of the world. He states that while Germanic armies were invading and conquering the people of the world, intellectuals of German ancestry were constructing an ideological universe dominated by Germanic concepts of Western superiority, a process which ascribed European dominion as inevitable and righteous, and African subordination as a necessary step in a long, protracted civilizing mission by Europeans for African benefit. For Carruthers, European histography offered little in terms of facilitating the reclamation of African history and culture in the wake of the European conquest. Instead, he argued that Africans had to reclaim an African histography, but in order to do this, they would first have to develop an African-centered worldview. All right, so if you guys want to check out more articles more information about this article that was written by Kamau Rashid, just look it up on the researchgate.net. And the title is Jacob H. Carruthers and the African Center Discourse on Knowledge, Worldview, and Power. Okay. Dr. Kamaru Rashid, that's his name. He is an assistant professor of Educational Foundation, Technology, and Inquiry at National Louis University. All right. Then I have another source that I want to show you guys. So this was written by Jacob H. Carruthers himself. Okay. It can be found on Sage publication and the Journal of Black Studies, June of 1992, volume 22, number 4. All right. Page 459 to 476. All right. It's called Outside Academia, Bernard's Critique of Black Champions of Ancient Egypt. Let's see what he wrote. All right, so he gave a critique about Martin Bernard's work. So we're going to start looking at the first paragraph. It says, David Walker in his 1829 appeal was not the first expatriated African in the Western Hemisphere to connect African Americans with the Kemites or ancient Egyptian. In his 1794, his mentor, Reverend Richard Allen, along with Absalom Jones, had implicitly tied us to the biblical prophecy. Princes shall come forth from Egypt, and Ethiopia shall stretch from her hand. Allen evidently accepted the notion put forth in medieval Jewish and Muslim tradition that connected Africans with the curse of Ham. Prince Sanders, an African American who migrated to and became a citizen of Haiti, had pointed out in 1816 that the Egyptian and Ethiopians were our ancestors. Sanders was following the contemporary Haitian state philosopher of Haitian Revolution, P.V. but was it Vastely, who, along with Hall, had connected the worldwide struggle by African peoples for liberation with the ancient civilization of Africa. What Walker's statement indicated was that a dialogue among Africans about Kemet was either in progress or needed to be instituted. I believe the former was the case. In other words, the traditional view implied by Reverend Allen and others that the ancient Egyptians were devils needed to be re-examined in the light of the pursuit of what we call today an African-centered historiography. Walker's perspective has been the consensus of most serious African thinkers for at least the last 200 years. In his words, Africans should take a retrospective view of the arts and sciences, the wise legislator, the pyramids, and other magnificent buildings, the turning of the channel of the river Nile by the sons of Africa or Ham, among whom learning originated and was carried thence into Greece. David Walker not only laid out the Africanness and priority of ancient Nile Valley civilization, including its major influence on Greece, he also anticipated Sheikh Anta Diop's two-cradle theory. In that regard, Walker asserted, the whites have always been an unjust, jealous, unmerciful, avaricious, and bloodthirsty set of beings, always seeking after power and authority. We view them all over the Confederacy of Greece, where they were first known to be anything in consequences of education. We see them there cutting each other's throats, trying to subject each other to wickedness and misery, to effect which they use all kinds of deceitful, unfair, unmerciful means, and find we view all over Europe together with what were scattered about in Asia and Africa as heathens, and as we see them acting more like devils than accountable men. And then he goes on to say, Walker then addressed the ethos of Africans and Asians. Some may ask, did not the blacks of Africa and the mulattoes of Asia go on in the same way? I answer no, they were half so avariciously deceitful and unmerciful as the whites. My emphasis, the description of Western Asians as mulattoes also anticipated Diop's assertion that Western Asia was the zone of confluence and the Semitic people were mulattoes. All right. So now he goes on to talk about, because I got to skip a little bit. So he said, thus argued Walker in 1829 in a discourse aimed at all people of African descent, which included not only he learned so-called free African Americans, but in his words, all colored men, women, and children of every nation, language, and tongue under heaven. In other words, he expected most living Africans in the world to read the appeal. As for those who could not read, he hoped that they would get someone to read it to them, for it is designed more particularly for them. Okay. In fact, the only Africans who would refuse to heed his appeal were those who were too deceitful, objected, and surveilled to resist the cruelties and murders inflicted upon us by the white slaveholders, our enemies by nature. Walker's perspective set the agenda followed by Hosea Easton in 1837, by Henry Highland Garnett in 1848, and by Martin Delany throughout his long scholarly career. It is also the agenda of the Black scholars whom Martin Brunell calls the Black champions of ancient Egypt. I have presented this abbreviated overview of a significant African-American dialogue as a perspective from which to comment on the arguments in the Brunell's Black Athena, especially his critique of these Black scholars. Okay. Now let's see what he's talking about here. All right, he goes on to say, let us now review Martin Bernard's contribution while reading Black Athena. I often recall an incident from my graduate student days. The political science department had hired a newly minted graduate from the University of Michigan whose specialty was the scientific methodology of the Survey Research Center. The new professor was invited to give a lecture to methodology class, of which I was a member. He made a lengthy and tedious presentation of a quantitative methods he had used to conclude that wealthy older people tended to vote Republican and that poor younger people tended to vote Democratic or not at all. During the question period, I had the temerity to ask the new professor what he had found that we did not already know. His answer was, before you thought you knew it, now you know it. For at least 200 years, African champions of ancient Egypt have been asserting what Bernard concludes about Kemet. Now that a European scholar has proclaimed it, the dialogue about the identity and significance of the Kemites has been reopened. I am not equating Bernard's attitude with that of the novice political scientists, although his comments on the attractment of scholarship may be so construed. And goes on to give reference, see Bernard page 401, 402, and my comment on the passage below, page 472. All right. Many of those who have reached to his work suggest such an orientation. Bernard, however, has made a valuable contribution to the movement towards the truth about antiquity and has discussed some information that many of us had possibly been unaware of or ignored. He should be commended for his productive efforts. All right. The inside outsider. In his introduction, Professor Bernard implicitly and modestly identifies his effort with the scientific, quote unquote, revolutionary tradition explained by Thomas Kuhn. In his well-known study, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, Bernard emphasizes that he is an outsider in relationship to the subject under review. By this, he means that his training and long specialization in Chinese history marked him as a non-expert in the sacred domains of such discipline as classic biblical archaeology, and Egyptology. Where was I at? Oh, but in relationship to the Black scholars with whom he hopes to identify, he is at least inside academia. Thus, for us, he is an inside outsider. Indeed, from my viewpoint, his value is in attacking that what I call the new orthodoxy from the inside. All right. All righty. Still speaking for himself in relation to his project, Bernard shares what he wants the readers to know about his public, private, and scholarly interests. His private concern for his somewhat vaguely defined Jewish ancestry is joined with his public interest in the current Middle East crisis. His scholarly interest in destroying the Iron model is united with his public interest in lessening European cultural arrogance. His genealogical connection to Alain Garnier, an aristocrat in the field of Egyptology, is related to his invasion of the domain of archaeology. Now, then he goes on to say, Martin Bernard's project is a penetrating critique of modern historiography. Basically, he attacks what he calls the Iranian model, which he asserted replaced the superior ancient model. Both models address the relationship between Greek culture and the cultures of African and Asian antiquity. Bernard defines the ancient model in brief as the conventional view among Greeks in the classical and Hellenistic ages, according to which Greek culture has arisen as a result of colonization around 1500 BC by Egyptian and Phoenicians who had civilized the native inhabitants and from whom the Greeks had continued to borrow heavily. All right. So again, in this article or his essay, he is giving critique about an author who was a professor by the name of Martin Bernard. All right. And his work and how he's comparing to ancient Greek and ancient Egypt. So he's giving some strong criticism here, as you can tell from what I'm reading. So yeah, he's giving him that tongue a backlash. Now, this article came out in 1992, by the way. So, but you know what? This is a good way of being able to vet people's sources and critique, just by being able to write an essay like this. So what he's doing is he's vetting the man's sources. He's giving critiques on it. It's a lot of information here, as you can tell, but that's what, that's what you do when you've done your research, your thorough research, and you're looking at somebody's work. As an author and as a person that's an educator or a historian, you're going to write essays and write articles or whatnot, critiquing and vetting the work of other authors out there. So let's go on down with this critique of Bernard's model. In my opinion, the ancient model put forth by Bernard overemphasizes the possible colonization theory of commanding influence on ancient Greece. He certainly does not make a case that colonization of Greece by Egypt in the modern historical sense of Western imperialism did in fact occur. Although colonies of Egyptian may have been established in many areas of Eurasia, such immigration and settlement were probably not massive enough to account for the rather extensive influence of Egyptian civilization on Greece. Rather, future volumes dealing with more extensively with the linguistic basis of Bernard's argument will be more convincing remains to be seen. In the meantime, the indirect impact of Egyptian civilization on transcontinental world cultures over a sustained period of several centuries or even millennia, coupled with the teaching by Egyptian priests of sages and thinkers from those society may very well account for the general conclusion gleaned from ancient authorities such as Herodotus, Plato, Isocrates, and Aristotle, as well as the biblical tradition. Certainly, this is the case with early modern European thinkers such as Giordano Bruno and Francis Bacon. Thus, the explanation of Egyptian influence put forth by the 19th century champions of ancient Egypt, whom Bernard ignores, by George G.M. James, whom Bernard does recognize, is perhaps quite adequate. So again, there is a lot of strong critiques going on here. Bernard's model also tends to minimize the historical and cultural connection between Kemetic and Phoenicia and the Mediterranean rim of Western Asia generally. This is particularly significant for the period 2000 and 1500 BC, which Bernard describes as a colonization era vis-a-vis Egypt and Greece. Bernard's periodization includes Kemetic influence on the area from the 12th dynasty through the Hyksos period. The Hyksos dominion included not only northern Egypt, but also the Palestinian region. Later, during the New Kingdom, the military dominance of Kemetic prevailed throughout Western Asia for several centuries. Such historical factors could also explain a great deal of the more direct influence of Kemet upon the emerging Greek culture through Kemet's Western Asian basis. All right, so I'm gonna stop right there. But if you are interested of looking at more of this information here, all you gotta do is go on jastor.org, which is JSTOR.org, and you can look up the Journal of Black Studies, Jacob H. Carruthers. Okay. If you are interested, or you can go on Google Scholar and find out more information. Just go on Google Scholar and type this up. All right. Type in the name Jacob H. Carruthers, and it'll pull up various sources that he has written, and you can go from there. All right. So anyways, all right then. And Sister Shakur, peace to you, and you're so welcome. I'm glad that I'm doing what I'm doing, and I appreciate you for tuning in and watching. So make sure you guys share the channel, share the video. If you are liking what you see, go ahead and share the video. My whole thing is I just like to share the sources and information to people. So I want people to be able to reach out and find out what they can research for. So whatever question they may have, or whatever, anything they want to know, they can be able to find out for themselves. So the information is there. You just have to do it. You have to do your own research, and it's not easy to find certain information, but it's out there. Okay. So I'm only giving a few sources. So, I'm just giving a lot of literary sources that you can use for your own benefits. All right. Anyways, I want to thank you guys again for tuning in and watching. So if you guys want to share the channel, please do so. Hit the notification bell, subscribe to the channel. And if you also want to go ahead and donate to the Cash App, as you can see at the bottom of the screen where it's scrolling, that says $tip world, $tip world, as you can see. If you want to go ahead and send some donation, you're more than welcome to do so as well. I appreciate that. Thank you. All right. So until next time, you guys, please be safe, be careful, and stay Stay focused. Be on top of your knowledge game. All right. Until then, until I connect with you guys later, this is your girl Tiffany, and I am out. And once again, I appreciate all of you that has tuned in and that's been watching my channel from for these past several months, almost a year. So thank you. Y'all take it easy. All right. Oh, also another thing. Team Osiris is doing a debate league. So if you guys are interested of doing a debate and you feel like you guys are great debaters and you got the information, you got what it takes, go ahead and reach out to Team Osiris. Check out the group in Team Osiris. As a matter of fact, I am going to put it in the chat as I'm typing it right now. All right, so if you are interested in debating, please check out Team Osiris and let them know. Reach out to the group. So we're looking for debaters, and if you are interested and you think you got what it takes and you think you got the information and you think you can do it, go ahead and reach out to Team Osiris. Check out the group on Facebook. All right, and also make sure you check out the YouTube channel as well, the Team Osiris channel. So again, thank you guys so much. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, y'all take it easy. Please be safe. And until next time, all right, I'm out.